one of the most important, one of the most interesting questions it's possible to look at. In fact, possibly it is the most important and the most interesting question it's possible to look at. And the question that we're looking at is this: is there life after death? Is there a heaven? Is there a judgment day? Is this life all that there is, or is there something else? It's such an interesting topic. You don't see many topics discussed on the telly or hear them on the radio, but life after death is one of those things that you hear about and people just like to discuss. And it's a crucial question. It's crucial to come to an answer because it affects how you live. And so there's three things I want us to see from this passage to help us answer that question. Is there life after death? I want us to see a skeptical question, a sure answer, and a solid hope. A skeptical question, a sure answer, and a solid hope. First of all, a skeptical question. In verse 18, we're introduced to some Sadducees. And Sadducees came to him, Mark tells us, who say that there is no resurrection. And they ask him a question. Now, who are the Sadducees? Well, in many ways, the Sadducees are the opposite to the Pharisees. You often see them paired together in the Bible. The Pharisees were the moral conservatives of the day. They were concerned about keeping the law, and they were kind of the men of the people. The Sadducees, they were the wealthy aristocrats. They were connected to the priesthood, and so the priesthood in those days, there was political influence and religious influence. They were very influential people, and they were liberals. The Sadducees were skeptical about the resurrection. In fact, the Sadducees, they believed in God, but they didn't believe in angels, didn't believe in demons, didn't believe in the devil, didn't believe in Judgment Day, didn't believe in heaven, didn't believe in an afterlife. They believed that when a person dies, their soul dies as well as their body. There's nothing else to come. Well, they come to Jesus with a question in verses 19 to 23. And this question revolves around around a woman being married 7 times. And the basis of the question is to do with an Old Testament law. It's called the law of levirate marriage, which you find in Deuteronomy 25. And the idea was, if a man died and left a widow, a childless widow, then his brother was obliged to marry the childless widow. For a couple of reasons. First of all, if you were a childless widow, you were very vulnerable. There's no social welfare back then. If you were a wife, you wouldn't be able to go out and get a job. It just didn't happen. If you were childless, of course, you've got no children to look after you. And if you've already been married, men would probably look twice at wanting to marry you. And so you're in a vulnerable position. And so what God did is he put into his law a merciful law for widowed, childless women. And that was that a brother could marry them. But also, you would marry them in order to preserve the name of the dead, to preserve their memory, and to look after their property. Well, that was the law, and the thing that concerns us is that the Sadducees take this law, which is found in Deuteronomy, and use it to build an argument for why there's no resurrection. They say, well, this guy marries a wife, and he dies, has no children. So, according to this law, brother should come and marry her. He does. He dies as well. The third brother then takes on the responsibility, marries this woman, and then he dies, and so on until the seventh brother dies as well. Don't know if it was her cooking, but they use this to illustrate what they think is the fact that there is no resurrection. Because they say, well, at the resurrection, whose wife is she going to be? Because they've all been married to her. You know, what they're doing is they're using a bit of humor and a bit of common sense to ridicule the idea that there's life after death. So what can we learn from their skepticism? Well, I think there's a couple of things we can learn. The first thing is this. Skepticism is good. It's good to be skeptical. It's good to ask questions. It's good not just to go along with the norm. See, back in the first century, the Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection, but most of the other Jews did. They believed in life after death. You know, it's good to ask questions. Just because you were told something when you were young doesn't mean it's necessarily true. Just because the culture tells you something, it doesn't mean it's necessarily true. It's good to ask questions. You know, children are good at this. Teenagers, I'm finding, are very good at this. Dad, why are we going for a walk up a hill when it's raining? Just, you know, what do you say? You kind of go, well, that's a good question. When you're a dad, you might come up with the answer. You know, it's good to be asking questions. Why do we do this? Why do we believe this? You know, thinking is a good thing. It's good to be skeptical. But the problem with the Sadducees is they weren't skeptical enough. You see, why were they mocking the idea of a resurrection? Because they were sure and certain that there was no resurrection. They came to Jesus with their own assumptions, which they themselves didn't question. They were skeptical when it comes to life after death, but they weren't skeptical about why they were skeptical about life after death. You know, it's good to be skeptical, but make sure your skepticism is not restricted. You know, if you're asking questions about life after death, then, yeah, and you know, be skeptical about the idea of life after death, but be skeptical about your skepticism that there is no life after death. You see, if the Sadducees had been a bit more skeptical than they were, they might have seen some big holes in their logic and reasoning. You know, just take for a moment that they're right, that there's no life after death, that when you die, you cease to exist. Well, if that's right, then not only will you cease to exist, but everybody you've ever known will cease to exist. There will be nothing in the future. There's no heaven, there's no hell, there's no judgment day, there's no ongoing life. Well, what's the point of being alive then? Because if everything's just going to end in nothing, what's the point in doing anything? You know, what's going to last? Nothing's going to last. You're not going to last. What you do is not going to last. In fact, all those people who remember you aren't going to last, and so nobody's going to remember you anyway. And so there's no real point in life. You come from nothing. You're going back to nothing. What's in between? Nothing. If the end is meaningless and the beginning is meaningless, life is meaningless. You see, that's the logical conclusion to believing that there's no life after death. But we don't live like that. We don't think like that. We think that our lives have meaning and purpose. We think that what we do counts. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. We think that our life matters. Otherwise, we wouldn't live it. You know, we know that there's deep down that there's purpose and meaning in life. You know, it's good to be skeptical. Make sure that you're skeptical enough. If you're here this morning and you're skeptical about life after death, that is wonderful. But be skeptical about your skepticism. Question your questions. Don't come with assumptions to God. Question your assumptions. So we have a skeptical question, but, but how do we know then whether there's life after death? You know, how can you be sure that there's life after death? What is this life after death like? How do you know? How do we know? Well, we don't just see a skeptical question, we have a sure answer. And Jesus doesn't mess around with his answer. He says to the Sadducees, verse 24, "Is this not why you are wrong?" In fact, he says it right at the end of the passage as well in verse 27, "You are quite wrong." You know, there's a time and a place to debate, and there's a time and a place to say, look, you're just not thinking right. And that's what Jesus does here. But he doesn't just say you're not thinking right, he backs up his statement. He says, you're wrong because you do not know the scriptures or the power of God. You see, in verses 24 to 27, Jesus gives us here two reasons why they are wrong to dismiss life after death. Two reasons to believe that there is life after death. You see, Jesus doesn't just come and say to these Sadducees, oh, you're wrong in not believing it. He gives reasons. The Christian faith is a thinking faith. It's a reasoned faith. It's a faith that's based on reason, on logic, because it's a faith that's based on facts and truth. We shouldn't be afraid to debate. We shouldn't be afraid to reason things out. So Jesus gives two reasons for believing in life after death: the scriptures and the power of God. First of all, the scriptures. His answer to the scriptures being a reason to believe in life after death is found in verses 26 to 27. Jesus says this, "As for the dead being raised, have you not read in the book of Moses, in the passage about the bush, the burning bush, in Exodus chapter 3, verse 6, how God spoke to him saying, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob." He's not the God of the dead, but of the living. The Sadducees only accepted 5 books in the Old Testament, the first 5 books called the Pentateuch. And Jesus goes to the Pentateuch and goes to a key passage and a key verse in the Pentateuch where God meets Moses at the burning bush in order to argue the case for the resurrection. Jesus is really wise here. He goes to what the Sadducees would already accept. He gets inside their view of the world and their view of life, their belief system, to argue from it the fact of the resurrection. You know, if you're trying to convince someone about something, get inside their head, get inside their worldview and argue from where they're at. Well, he quotes, like I said, Exodus chapter 3. And as he quotes this, the thing that's really important is to see the tenses of the verbs. Okay, I'm going to take you back to English class at secondary school. You may have been a diligent student on the front row and know all this already, or like me, you may have spent more time looking out of the window and trying to get by. The tenses are crucial. Jesus says, and God says in Exodus 3, I am the God of Abraham. He doesn't say, I was the God of Abraham. You see, God is saying this centuries after Abraham has died. He's with Moses at the burning bush. And he says, I am still the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, even though they're dead and have been dead for a long time. See, what God is saying is that these guys are still alive. When God met with Moses at the burning bush, what was going on? Well, what was going on was this. God came to Moses and spoke to him from the burning bush and called Moses and said, Moses, I want to have a personal relationship with you. A covenant relationship, a relationship based on promise. And I want a personal relationship not just with you, but with all the Israelites. I want to be their God, and I want them to be my people. I want to make a covenant relationship with them. And that's why he calls them out of Egypt. The reason for the Exodus and the whole book of Exodus is because God wants a people for himself, a people who he can know and love, and a people who can know and love him. See, that was why God called Abraham, and God called Isaac, and God called Jacob. That's why he says, I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. You see, we use language a bit like this as well, don't we? You know, we are in conversation with someone, and we say, you know, me and my missus went out the other night. Or we say, you know, our Paul is doing this. Now, we're not saying that your missus belongs to you. You're not saying that Paul belongs to you, our Paul, my missus. What you're saying is, the missus I've got a deep relationship with. I've got this deep relationship with Paul. Sometimes we use the words uncle. Oh, so-and-so's my uncle, or so-and-so's my brother. And they're not your brother or uncle at all. They might be a distant relative. But, you know, there's somebody I've got this relationship with, a deep personal relationship with. And that's what God is saying here. He's saying, I've got a deep personal relationship with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. An ongoing relationship with those people. A relationship that's still continuing. I am their God now. You see, God's come and says, I want to be, to Moses, your God now. I'm their God now. I want a relationship with you that will never go into the past tense. A relationship with you that's always present. You know, if it was in the past tense, what would God say? You know, it's actually awful to think about. You know, if you have a relationship, a loving relationship with someone, you always want that relationship in the present tense, because what's the past tense? I had a daughter. I had a husband. I had a friend. You never want a personal relationship with someone that you love to be in the past tense. You always want it to be in the present. I have a daughter. I have a husband. I have a brother. And God is the same. You know, when God makes a personal relationship with someone, it is permanent. It is always present. Because it's not based upon how long we live. It's based upon how long God lives, and God will never die. And so that relationship can never die. You see, when God makes a covenant relationship, a personal relationship with someone, it's a relationship which will last forever. And therefore, because we're going to die, there must be a resurrection. There must be life after death. Not because we are immortal, not because God has a life that will never end. And therefore his relationships will never end. And therefore if you have a relationship with him, you will never end. Even though you die, you will be raised. Even though Abraham died, he was going to be raised. Jacob died, he was going to be raised. Isaac died, he was going to be raised. I am the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And if God says that about you, then you will never die. Because God says, I am your God. You will be raised. See, God is not the God of the dead. Just imagine being the God of the dead. Who wants to be the God of the dead? The dead. Who's worshiping you? Nobody, because the dead, you know, he's the God of the living. A relationship with God cannot be ended by death. The scriptures are the first reason to believe in life after death, but there's a second, and that's the power of God. Jesus talks about this in verse 25. He says, when they rise from the dead, they neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels in heaven. Jesus is telling us here what life after death is like. The problem with the Sadducees was this. Their thinking about the afterlife was too small. They were thinking in an earthly way. See, they were assuming that the afterlife is just simply an extension of this life. And therefore, heavenly relationships are simply an extension of earthly relationships. And that included marriage. This is quite a common argument that people say today, you know. Why would I want to go to heaven? It must be boring. Because they look at life and go, well, life's boring. And if heaven's just an extension of life, well, heaven must be boring. See, these Sadducees presume that there's marriage in heaven because they presume that heaven is simply an extension of this life. And so they look at this woman and they say, well, how can she be married 7 times in heaven? They're trying to put Jesus in a tricky situation because if he says, you know, heaven is an extension of this life, then he's going to have to come up with some convoluted arguments to persuade them, well, maybe, yes, she was married 7 times here, but maybe the first husband is the one she's going to be married to in heaven, or the 7th, or the 3rd, because he was the best looking. You know, she's going to have to come up with some argument or reason, or he's going to have to concede that there is no afterlife. They're trying to put him in a tricky position. But what Jesus says is this. Your assumptions about the afterlife are just doolally. You're just thinking wrong. See, the resurrected life is not an extension of this life. It's an entirely different sort of life. It's an entirely new dimension. That's why Jesus says, they neither marry nor are given in marriage. Does that mean that heaven's less loving than earth? You know, some marriages are difficult, but, you know, when it comes to personal relationships, you know, often the deepest love and the deepest joy is found in a very healthy marriage. Does that mean that in heaven there's less intimacy, there's less joy, there's less love? Well, Jesus is saying no. He's saying not a chance. In fact, it's exactly the opposite. Your thinking is wrong. See, the Bible portrays heaven as a world of love. A world where we will know God's love completely. That's why in 1 Corinthians 13, that passage often read at weddings, occasionally read at funerals, like I'll be reading this week. The end of the chapter, it says, and now faith, it's all a chapter on love, and at the end Paul says, and now faith, hope, and love abide, and the greatest of these is love. Why is love the greatest? Because love abides longer than faith and hope, because you don't need faith and hope when you're in heaven. Heaven is a world of love. It's a world where we will know the love of God completely. You'll be known completely by God and loved completely by God. And you will love God completely. And you will love others. You will love others as you should, your neighbor as yourself. And other people, your neighbors, will love you as they should. Will love you as themselves. See, heaven is a world of love. Heaven is such a world of love that it will make the greatest marriage and the happiest intimacy here on earth seem nothing in comparison. It will be far greater, far happier, far more loving than even the best marriage here and now. See, God's power to create and restore and resurrect life is far greater than you and I can ever imagine or think. That's why the Bible doesn't go into lots of details about what heaven is like, because it's unimaginable. It is a world of love beyond our comprehension. It's a future which we can't bring into our minds now. There's some things we know. There will be, you will be known and recognized for who you are, just as Abraham and Isaac and Jacob will be known and recognized for who they are. You know, we don't get rid of our personalities and characters in heaven. People know you as you. You will know them as them. It will be full of love, full of God loving you, full of other people who know God and who love God as well. It's a completely different dimension. It would be like comparing this life and heaven would be like comparing a caterpillar and a butterfly. There is a connection between the two. But if you did a spot the difference thing with a child and said, okay, tell me, spot the difference between a caterpillar and a butterfly. There's a lot of differences. And yet the two are intimately related. You know, if you say to a young child, oh, do you know that butterfly used to be a caterpillar? And you don't explain everything about how the chrysalis happens and all that kind of thing. You know, a child would go, really? Or an acorn and an oak tree. The two are deeply connected. You go to an oak tree and say, oh, as I saw the other day, this huge oak tree, maybe 300 years old, massive girth. That came from that acorn. It's the same thing. No. Yes. That's what happens in life. You know, a baby to a man. You know, heaven is going to become, it's a different dimension altogether. But it's a wonderful place of love. Because God will be there. Because all those who love God and trust God will be there. You know, we know in life that relationships are more important than anything else. Every summer we go on holiday to Norfolk and have done for the last 15 years. Same house, by the same beach. And this year, the house is being renovated. So we're like, we're distraught. What are we going to do for some holiday? Because the summer holiday is all about going to the same house by the same beach for 2 weeks in Norfolk. You know, until we kind of chat about it and say, yes, but what makes the holiday special? It's not the house by the beach in Norfolk. It is being together as a family for 2 weeks. Relationships are more important than what you do. And the same is true in heaven. The reason heaven's a world of love is because God's going to be there. And you're going to be in a perfect relationship with him. Those who love God are going to be there, and you're going to be in a perfect, loving relationship with them. You see, marriage is held up today. Relationships are held up today as wonderful. The reason why it says that at the resurrection there's no more weddings is not because there's no more marriage. It's interesting how Jesus phrases it. He says they're neither going to marry nor be given in marriage. He doesn't say there's no marriage, because we will all be married to God. Jesus is the ultimate bridegroom, and his people will be the ultimate bride. And that relationship will be the ultimate marriage of the ultimate joy and the ultimate love. And Jesus, that bridegroom, died on the cross for his bride, to bring his bride into relationship with him, not just now, but forever. You see, everyone's going to be married to God in heaven. Heaven's going to be a world of love. So finally, if there is a life after death, and we know there is because of the Bible says so, because of God's power, the question is, and this is a really important question, how do you get there? You know, how can you be part of that loving relationship with God forever? How can you be part of that world of love? You know, you may want to be part of that world of love, but how do you know whether you're going? You know, you may want to get into heaven, but how do you get through the door? Well, the third thing Jesus tells us is about a solid hope. How can you be sure that you're going to heaven? Well, how did Abraham and Isaac and Jacob become people of God? How did God have a relationship with them? Well, he came to them with promises. He said, I want to be your God. I want you to be my man. And I want us to have a relationship forever. And that relationship will not be based upon you being good and nice. It will be based upon my promises to you, which are unconditional. And Abraham and Isaac and Jacob believed what God said. They believed God's promises. And God comes to you this morning and asks the same question. See, God comes to you this morning and says, will you believe my promises? My promises about a relationship with me, my promises about heaven. Will you believe those? And my promises are not just vague promises which are in the distance, which they were to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but those promises have been fulfilled in Jesus Christ. You see, the ultimate answer to the question about the resurrection is fulfilled not in the words of Jesus, but in the person and life of Jesus. A few days after this, Jesus was going to die on the cross. Die for the sins of the world. Die for your sins. For all the ways that you failed to love God as you should and failed to love others as you should. He was going to take those sins upon himself and be punished in your place, judged in your place for those things, so that you can be forgiven. So that you can have a relationship with God. And he didn't just die on the cross, but 3 days later he rose from the dead. See, the ultimate answer to the resurrection, and is there a resurrection, is there life after death, is Jesus Christ. He rose from the dead. He's alive today, never to die again. Death has no more hold over him. How do we know there's life after death? Because Jesus has life after death. And if you put your trust in Jesus Christ, you will have life after death as well. Just as Abraham and Isaac and Jacob believed the promises of God, if you believe the promises of God, then you will be where they are. You will be in heaven, not because you're good and nice and kind, although that would be great if we're all good and nice and kind, but because you believe the promises of God in Jesus Christ. They believe them, they will be raised. You believe them, you will be raised. You will be part of that world of love that will never end. And so God comes to you and says, do you believe? Will you believe my promises? Will you believe my promise that I sent my son to die for you on a cross? That I loved you so much that I wanted a relationship with you. That I wanted a deep and a loving relationship with you, which is greater than the greatest marriage. A relationship with you that will never end. I want a relationship with you that will never end. When a married couple stand at the front of church and make promises, they promise to love each other no matter what. But they promise to love each other temporarily. That is, they promise to love each other until we die. God promises to love you after death. God promises to love you forever and forever. Nobody else has ever promised that to you. Nobody else could ever promise that to you. Only God. But that's what he wants. He wants a deep personal relationship with you. Will you accept it? Will you believe it? And if you do believe it, then the impact it should have in your life now is huge. You might be here this morning and you're old. You're coming into the twilight years of your life. You look back at your life and you look forward and you think, well, what future do I have? Maybe your body's packing in. I did a 5K run yesterday, and my park run time was significantly less than the time I did it 10 years ago. Our bodies are packing in. What future do you have to look forward to? Well, if you believe in Jesus Christ, you've got a great future to look forward to. Because death's not going to be the end for you. Your body may be packing in, but you're going to get a new body. Your relationships might be breaking down, but you're going to get new relationships. And those good relationships and loving relationships with people who trust in Jesus now are going to continue beyond the grave. If you're here this morning and your life isn't as you would want it to be, it's disappointed you, you look and you think, oh, this isn't the way I wanted things to turn out. It's not what I expected. The relationships in my life aren't what I would expect. Do you know that your best life is yet to come? The best relationships are yet to come. You know, the most loving relationship you have here and now is nothing compared to the loving relationship you will have in the future with other people. You know, if you're here this morning and you'd love to be married and you're not, or you have been married and you're no longer married, you're going to be married in the future with a spouse who's going to love you like no man on this world, within this world can. Like no woman in this world can. If your relationships are difficult and hard work, they're going to be sorted one day. One day your life will be full of love. You know, and the problem, you'll look back on the problems and the miseries and the sadness and the broken relationships that you're experiencing now. It will be like a night in a bad hotel compared to the millions and millions of years that you have ahead of you. And if you're young here this morning, and I want to address this final thing to younger people, don't waste your life by living for the here and now. Live for the future. We're bombarded every day with temptations to live for the here and now. And the temptations are great to do that. If I go to my 2-year-old daughter with a £50 note and a small chocolate bar and ask her which she wants, she's always going to choose the chocolate bar. But we know which is more valuable. The now seems better. The future is far, far greater and far, far more valuable. Younger people, live for the future. Don't live for now. And if you focus on the future, it will benefit your life here and now as well. Is there life after death? There is life after death. There is life after death. Believe in Jesus, and you won't just know it, you'll experience it. Let me pray. Gracious Father, we thank you that our hope in the resurrection and in life after death is not some mythical, airy-fairy thing. But we thank you that it is grounded in your word, it's grounded in your power, and ultimately it's grounded in the person and the life of Jesus Christ. Help us to believe in him, to trust him, that we might experience that world of love, that life after death, that time of eternity with you. In your presence, Lord, is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures evermore. Bring us to that place, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.